Okay, so we are going to get started in a moment. If people can take their seats. I'm going to call to order our Mayor's Council meeting. We're just going to start with adoption of the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We're going to move to the approval of the minutes. There is a slight change. One of the delegates' names was spelled incorrectly, so if I can get someone to move the minutes as corrected. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving to item 2.1, south of the Fraser Rapid Transit Public Engagement Update, and we do have a staff presentation here.
Good morning, thank you. I'm going to get the slides going here. So I'm here to update you on the public engagement results that we undertook in April for Surrey Langley SkyTrain and what we're calling South of Fraser Rapid Transit Refresh. So I'm going to go into some details here today on what we heard from the public, and I'll have a few slides on that. So first of all, just keep in mind when we started this process, we had three objectives in doing the engagement. Number one, we were committed to a really broad engagement to ensure that people had a real opportunity to get involved and get the information they needed on these potential projects. Secondly, we wanted to get feedback and some real local insight to identify the priorities and issues that were involved and really set the stage for further engagement in the future. And then third, we wanted to, of course, help deliver the project and advance the project by meeting our engagement objectives. So with that, our consultation, our engagement took place in April between the 4th and the 26th, so about 3 weeks there. We had a number of opportunities for people to get involved online, in person, and really reaching out to a cross-section of community groups. We were out in public for 3 weeks. We kicked it off with a technical briefing with the media. We did an online survey in both English and Punjabi. We had information boards on our Surrey Langley SkyTrain website, 4 open houses in Langley, Fleetwood, Surrey City Centre, and Newton, as well as some of the major transit hubs in the area. We did a lot of advertising, including advertising in Chinese, Filipino, Korean, to make sure that we're reaching out to our audiences. And we had a lot of community opportunities as well, attending Surrey Vaisakhi Parade, Party for the Planet, and we actually went to Hindu and Sikh temples in the Surrey area as well. And so we did end up with record participation in this. We had more than 21,000 responses to our survey, which is the second largest engagement response we've had in our history. So as you can see, it was a very, very highly engaged audience. We also had almost 1,000 people attend our open houses. Again, that's a very, very high number for us. So as you can see, there was a significant interest in this topic. Now, I'll also note that we did a market research survey as well in order to make sure that we were not completely off in our results. We wanted to make sure we had a check. So we also did a market research survey of 1,200 people as well. Now, in terms of results, I'll just go through the results of each of the key questions. In terms of results, familiarity with the plan to build rapid transit. So we asked the question around the original Mayor's Council 10-year vision that calls for building 27 kilometers of rapid transit on the 104 Avenue corridor, the King George Boulevard corridor, and the Fraser Highway corridor. And as you can see, about 45% of people in the Surrey Langley area and 45% of people in the rest of the region were familiar with that plan. In terms of Surrey Langley SkyTrain in particular, again, coming out of, it was a big topic of conversation in the election period, so we saw a little bit of a higher number there. 58% of people in the Surrey Langley area were familiar with that potential project, and 54% region-wide. And I'll note that the markets research survey indicated similar levels of familiarity as well. Now, in terms of support for the proposed Surrey Langley SkyTrain project, the results show that, consistent with what we've heard previously for rapid transit projects generally in the area, there is a significant level of support for rapid transit. On Surrey Langley in particular, we saw 85% support in the Surrey Langley area and 84% in the rest of Metro Vancouver. And in terms of the market research survey, again, numbers would be slightly lower than this, but again, a very consistently high level of support for rapid transit. We also asked the question of around values. What are the values we should consider when we're considering rapid transit planning on the 104 Avenue corridor and the King George Boulevard corridor? Now, the top 3 values from the public open survey were predictable transit travel time that helps me get to my destination faster. Secondly, efficient use of public money. And third, a comfortable and safe experience when I use transit. And our market research survey showed the same top 3, just in a slightly different order. In terms of the public open houses, the only one that intervened differently was interest in increased transportation options that give people a choice. So there's a lot of support for a lot of these values. As you can see, there's right down the list, there's really significant support for a lot of the values that we outlined. So other considerations, this is where we want to start identifying other topics and issues that we want to consider along the way. So on the left, you'll see we listed a number of topics that we will be studying and assessing along the way. But we then asked the question, what else should we consider? What are some of the other things we should have in our consideration? Now, these responses are based on a random sample of those 21,000 responses. Obviously, we can't go through each one of those individually, so we did a random sample of the 21,000 responses, and these were the common themes that came up. Safety and security, access to future transit stations through things like parking, bus connections, cycling and walking paths, and then also with concerns around impact of construction along the way. And then finally, we asked for any additional comments, any other comments or questions that might come up. People express support for SkyTrain because it's quick, it's efficient, it addresses congestion issues. They see it as integrating Surrey and Langley with the larger region, and they saw it as a long-term transportation solution. We also find there were people that continued to advocate for LRT. They continue to do so because it's cost-effective, it connects neighborhoods in the Surrey area. They express support for environmental impact and being less disruptive to neighborhoods as well. Just of note, there were far more comments about SkyTrain than LRT. So this will, all of this input will be put together in a report that will be advanced to the July update for the Mayor's Council, which is updating the Mayor's Council in a number of elements of the proposed project. This is a key input to that plan, and we wanted to just give you that update now that we have this information collated.
Okay, well, really appreciate the report and the update. I think in the coming months, the Mayor's Council is going to be getting a lot more information, and we'll be making some decisions about the future of rapid transit south of the Fraser River and into Surrey. But I think this engaging the public and getting feedback there is obviously an important component of that. I will now open up to any around the table if they have any questions or comments. Mayor Walker.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the report. I have 3 questions, and I'll kind of break them down. You talked about further engagement. What does that look like, and when will that be possible?
So next steps of engagement will follow the July report to the Mayor's Council. So once we get that report out to the Mayor's Council, that's when we'll take a look at what are the next steps we have to look at both with the SkyTrain project, but also then the refresh on the 104th Avenue corridor and the King George Boulevard corridors. So we have more work to do, but we'll define that as we move forward towards July.
Hey, thank you. And just for your edification, there may be other pieces that small communities like myself at White Rock, and of course the South Surrey will be looking at. I know I harp on this thing, but it's really the only thing I have to harp on, and so it gives me an opportunity to spout and so on. The second question is...
That's what the Mayor's Council meetings are all about.
And Chair, I truly appreciate that. The second question is around, and I'm not sure if this is the appropriate place, and there's one other, and I'm not sure if it's appropriate appropriate there either. But changes in bus routes and times and so on. Recently, I've become aware of some changes that are coming to our area in terms of large buses as opposed to the small community shuttles and so on. What that looks like, times indeed that they may be operational or that they may actually stop operating. It's very much a concern to the folks of our community. I may have missed, the memo on that one. I was away for a while, so I'll accept some responsibility for it. But just clarification on what that looks like. And I don't expect it today, but I would like an opportunity to sit down with somebody and talk about what it looks like. I get a chance to learn from that particular piece, and I think that's really, really important. So when I go back to my council, and indeed my community, I can talk on what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely, Mayor. We'll follow up on that. When we make any changes to things like routes, frequency, schedules, we do outreach to residents and elected officials to make sure they're informed and supportive of what we're looking at. So we'll get back to you with any specific changes on the routes you're talking about.
Thank you. And I have one more, Chair, and it's maybe a bit of a pig in a poke, but it's around the interurban. There's been some discussion, and I've seen a number of letters come through, across my desk about the use of the interurban, the use of rail lines that are in existence now, and whether we can actually use them to enhance transit between what appears to be, at minimum, Surrey, but certainly New Westminster, and indeed all the way out towards the Chilliwack area. I'm not sure that that's doable. I'm not sure if that's workable, but I certainly would like us to have a look at what that looks like so that an explanation could come back to this board, so I would be more able to deal with it, because I have people coming to me saying, why aren't we using these lines? They seem reasonable. So, again, it's for myself to be able to take forward, but the board in general might have some interest in what that looks like.
So just to jump in there, I think Translink is obviously well aware of that idea and those concepts, and I think that actually fits nicely into the work we're doing with Transport 2050, is where we're trying to evaluate all the next big ideas. So whether we're talking about exploring rapid transit to the North Shore, or we're looking at potential opportunities for the interurban, and would that work? That will be the framework in which those kind of big ideas can be explored and better analyzed.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Okay, are there any other comments regarding this report? If not, I'll look for a motion for receipt. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Yep, Mayor Brody.
There you go. Mr. Chair, I should have brought this up because this just reminded me what Mayor Walker just said. We need a common understanding of when delegations are allowed, because I know that there was at least one group that wanted to delegate to us today on that point, and there may have been others. Now, sometimes we get a list of the delegations, sometimes we're just advised when we get here, but I think we need a common understanding, because I am told that this delegation was told there was no room on the agenda and they couldn't come, and I don't think that's our rules.
So maybe I can have Mike Buda respond to that there, but we do have open delegations here, but we don't have them on every meeting. In this meeting, there wasn't time, but there will be time at the next meeting for open delegations to present. But maybe Mike can clarify.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's up to the Mayor's Council to determine whether there's time on their agenda, and if there is, then at almost all of our previous public meetings, there have been public delegates. At this meeting, the direction was that there wasn't time, and so the public delegates who did apply to speak at this meeting were informed that we can hold their application over to the June meeting, and all three of them agreed that would be fine.
Well, with respect, I'm not sure that it's a discretionary item. I think our rules provide that you may delegate for a certain period of time, and we allot 1 hour. And secondly, if there is that kind of discretion within this body, then I think that we should be told about it, because frankly, I think it's unfair for someone to simply tell a potential delegation that there's no room on the agenda, and that's the end of the question.
So I think we can report back to the Mayor's Council on that, and I will give that direction to our Executive Director. Okay, moving to item 2.2, which is the Massey Crossing review. I think the report was self-explanatory, so I don't think we need a presentation, but I think I will open it up to any questions or comments from the body if they have any. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, moving to item 3.1, which is the Phase 3 plan funding strategy milestones.
I think Jeff's going to speak to that one.
Thank you, Chair. Similar to the last report, it's a fairly self-explanatory piece. The one thing I would like to highlight, per the direction of this body to accelerate a Phase 3 investment plan, you see some milestones included in there. One of the key elements, obviously, will be developing a funding strategy to understand how much we can take on of the remaining investments in the Mayor's vision. The recommendation from staff informally at this point is to nest this in a longer-term sustainable funding strategy. As we take on the work around Transport 2050, we want to make sure that we're understanding what comes next after the Mayor's Council, what might be some of the tools, and so any near-term decisions that we're making around funding the remainder of the vision are at least aligned and informed with where we should be going for our revenue sources. So this is an iterative approach where we'll bring forward a lot of the information that's been compiled over the last roughly 8 to 10 years by the Mayor's Council and analyzed, as well as some new ideas that were put forward, whether it be land value capture and some other items, to provide you with a good consolidated piece of information that we then also share with the provincial government as those discussions ensue. So I'd open it up, Chair.
Okay, I'll open up to any discussion or questions. Not seeing any. This is just a report for information. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Jeff. 3.2 is the 10-year vision implementation and fleet and service planning.
Good morning. I'm not Jeff Cross, I'm Sarah Ross. It's close enough. As part of our regular update, this is part of our regular updates we want to give you on the status of implementing the 10-year vision and the investment plans that have been approved to turn on the funding to advance the vision. So today I'm going to focus a little bit on the fleet and service planning and just give you a status update on where we're at on that. So at the last meeting here of this table, I was presented on our transit service performance report, and I talked about the ridership growth that we are seeing across the region, and also spoke about some of the bus crowding in particular, but that we have been experiencing. And so today, just to follow up on that, wanted to give some more specifics on what we're doing to address that crowding as much as we can. And so the current investment plan does not include resources to expand service to address overcrowding in 2019. There is an allocation in 2020 to roll out more bus service to address overcrowding. But we know that it's an acute problem, and so we have been working to find a way to advance the rollout of some of that expansion. And so that is what we are doing. We did some in April, we're doing more in June, and then in September for a total of, I think it's 48 routes, we'll receive some extra service to help mitigate against some of that overcrowding. Now we are, working through a challenge that we don't have any extra buses to put any more service out during peak times. Every bus that we own is either already providing service in peak time, or it's sitting in a maintenance bay as part of the important maintenance program, which is required because we keep these buses for, on the order of 17 or more years. So what we can do is, during off-peak times, we're not running every bus in the system, and so we are able to increase service. So these routes that you're seeing here show where we are putting out extra service to address peak time. So to address times of overcrowding. So in June, the focus is particularly on adding more buses on weekends because it's very busy in the weekends all year, but particularly in the summer. And then in September, we're adding more frequency on the edges of the peak periods, so keeping some of those peak buses in service for longer, because we see that as crowding gets worse and ridership gets better and bigger, the peak periods tend to expand. So that's what we're doing on to address bus overcrowding. And as more fleet arrives in 2020, we will be able to put out more to address the issues more directly in the peak. So expansion fleet is on the way across the network. I'll get into this in a little bit more detail, but every mode is will be seeing increases. So on the rail side, the more fleet for the Expo and Millennium lines has already begun arriving. So we have funding that was approved through the investment plan to buy 56 new cars. 20 of those have arrived, and the final cars are expected by March 2020. So what happens when the cars arrive is they're put through tests at our operations and maintenance center, and that process typically takes about a month, but it can take longer if issues arise. And then they get put into service, they get put out onto the system running between stations but not in service. So that's the next phase of the commissioning process. And then they go into service in what we call trippers, which basically means they're not scheduled in a regular schedule, but they are running in revenue service. So they do get slotted in at busy times. So that's the third part of the commissioning. And then once we get through all of that, they get formally scheduled into the system, and the big service changes happen in September of this year, and then the following one in September of 2020. So there is a rigorous process that we go through when we receive the cars to make sure that they're commissioned properly, that there's no issues before we fully accept them, because like the buses, we keep these for a very long period of time, and we have to have a very high degree of confidence in them. We are diversifying our bus fleet to deliver, to better serve our different types of routes and our customers, and advance our environmental commitment. So we know that many people, and ourselves included, are very excited about the double-deckers that will begin arriving in July, again going through a testing and commissioning process, and then being entered into service in fall. Those double-deckers are going to be replacing the highway coach fleet. Some of you, particularly those of you who are from south of the Fraser, will know the kind of yellow buses where there's only one single door and it's more like a highway coach. So those are 17 or 18 years old now, and they're being replaced by these double-decker buses, which is literally doubling the capacity of a standard size bus, comparable to an articulated bus, but with a higher amount of seating. And so these are will be deployed primarily on those routes that are serving on some of our more highway-oriented services. We have a battery electric bus pilot that's on our 100 route that runs along South Marine Drive, connecting New Westminster along through Vancouver into Richmond. No, stops in Vancouver now because of the Canada Line story. And so we're testing different types of battery electric buses, and this is going to have both, the buses will get charged through en route chargers at the exchanges, and then they'll also be charging in the depots. So this is really exciting for us, so we're looking forward to that. The B lines will be having the articulated hybrid buses that will be doing serving the B lines, and those have already begun arriving. And then we're increasing our CNG fleet to replace aging diesel fleet with natural gas. We have had CNG for a long time in our fleet, and 3 of our depots are equipped with CNG fueling facilities. So in terms of upcoming bus procurement, we've got for 2020 more articulated buses, 19 more articulated buses coming, and then in 2021 more coming, and then in the looking to 2022 and 2023, we will be going to the Metro Vancouver Board with an application for the Greater Vancouver Regional Fund so that we can get that approved and have those buses ordered and then arriving in 2022 and 2023. So there is quite a long lead time, as you know, to ordering buses. And then finally, I'll just touch on the C-Bus update as the Phase 1 investment plan allocated funding to run the C-Bus at every 10 minutes during peak periods. Currently, it runs every 15 minutes. And the new C-Bus, named the Burrard Chinook, has been transported to the region, and now we are taking that vessel through our robust testing process. That's maybe a theme of my presentation today. So, and that's, oh, finally, sorry, I missed, how remiss of me to miss about HandyDart, but we also have a 15% increase in HandyDart from 2019 that's been rolling out over the last few years, and vehicles to support that are also now in service. I think that's it. There you go.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the update. Mayor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the double-decker bus for those of us in south of the Fraser, especially my communities in Delta of Tawasin and Ladner and Mayor Walker, I'm very concerned about the overcrowding on our buses that are taking the 601 route, basically traveling into Vancouver to the River Rock for their eventual destination. The majority of time during rush hour, people are standing on those buses, which is, I think, a real concern as far as public safety. And they're standing going speeds of 90K or less. Are the double-decker buses coming to the 601 route?
The 601 route connects from Bridgeport and serves into Tawasin. And I believe that the 601 route will not be served by a double-decker, but it will be served by a new highway to replace the Orions, and it will have a higher seating capacity than our typical urban standards. But I can follow up to confirm that.
We did have a very positive test with regards to our commuters. There were overhead power lines that we identified with your good Translink staff, and they've actually been adjusted now. And we were really hoping that we could get double-decker buses to ensure people don't have to, as best as we can, stand during a very fast traveling commute.
It's always a challenge, particularly in peak. We do typically expect that just because people are standing doesn't necessarily mean it's hitting our overcrowding. But we recognize that, particularly for longer trips, it's better for people to be able to sit, and that's an example of a longer trip. So I hear that.
Mr. Chair, appreciative the good staff here could just get back to me with regards to that.
No, I think we can provide that direction, sure. And if they could connect with yourself or any other applicable routes regarding that.
Thank you very much.
Issue. Are there any other questions regarding the presentation? Councillor Cameron?
I just have a quick question whether press the red button. I have a quick question whether the timeline for the 10-minute C-Bus service is still the same because you're undergoing testing. When can you just confirm when we expect to get the 10-minute service starting?
I don't have an exact date at this time. It will depend on that.
You have to press the center button so we can hear you.
Sorry. I don't have an exact date at that time. We anticipate it being in 2019. It will depend on exactly how the testing process
So it's not
goes.
happening imminently then for the summer probably with your expectation? Because I've been asked about whether it's going to be in place for Symphony of Fire, for example, and stuff like that. But is there any chance there will be or no?
I think that I don't think so. But I could confirm on what we can do on that.
Yeah, I think a lot will do with the testing, and the boat has just arrived, so there's obviously some work before it can come into service. Councillor Lady?
Well, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Well, I was wondering about when you were discussing the overcrowded buses, your strategy for addressing that. seemed that there was a lot of a problem. And you had mentioned that there was going to be some redeployment of the fleet during off-peak hours, and that in 2020 there would be increase to the fleet to address the overcrowding in those particular areas. Has there been consideration of underutilized areas during peak time in terms of, addressing it through, in the meantime, through changing some of the services that maybe aren't overcrowded during those periods of time?
So at this point, what we've been focusing on doing is in times when we have fleet available, we're taking that fleet and putting out extra service.
Right.
And then when we have more fleet, we will then focus and put out extra trips during peak times.
Right.
We have not gone through a process of looking at reallocating service from less busy places during the peak to busier places during the peak. That is actually an approach that Translink did take a number of years ago during a time when we had growth in demand, but we went through a number of years where we had absolutely no expansion. And through that time, we went through an optimization process to do some reallocation, where we had to reallocate services from less busy areas to busier areas. And as those of people at this table, some of whom were around, will remember it was not easy. And so fortunately, because we are in a period now of expansion, that I think that we are focused on using that expansion funding that we have, so that we aren't in a position of having to take away service from areas, because when what we're talking about is places that are hitting our overcrowding threshold, where the bus is over 100% full. We certainly don't want to, even though a place may be not at that level, we don't want to take service away and then cause that to
I'm not
happen.
so much looking at taking service away. Say, for instance, you have some of your routes are, the fleet it changes throughout the day. You have the longer buses and then some of the shorter buses, depending on the demand. I think I understand what you're saying, but it might be worth a second look in some of the areas where those changes occur during the day, as to whether or not you can time it differently so that you can use some of those longer buses. And
we definitely look at the fleet allocation and what the try to right size the fleet to make sure that we have the appropriate size fleet during the time of day. Sometimes it's one thing to keep in mind is that often our routes will have some sections that are very, very busy and other sections that are not as busy, but you can't swap the bus out in the middle. And as well as often just the way the schedules are worked, sometimes you need to kind of right-size that bus to the busiest time in that block and the busiest part of the route.
Yeah, got it. Thanks.
Mayor Kennedy Stewart.
Great, thanks very much for the presentation. So I'm really excited about this. It's going to help folks in their daily life and traveling around a lot, especially the electric buses. I think that's a really great pilot to be part of, and it matches transit with reducing greenhouse gas emissions and all that stuff, so really keen to see that going. I just had a question about the stats where you're talking about new buses coming online. I'm just wondering if you could give us a sense, maybe now or later, about net new buses. So I'm just wondering about loss, and as the fleet kind of, older buses age out.
These are all net expansion. We have a regular replacement program for those buses as they retire. So some of the double deckers is part of our replacement program, for example.
But the numbers you showed are net numbers, not gross, or?
This is the increase in the fleet.
Okay, great. That's really important to know. Thank you.
Okay, well, really appreciate the update. I think around this table we're well aware of the pressures on our transit system and some of the overcrowding, but I think we're now starting to see the investments in the Phase 2 plan are going to start to hit the system, and we are going to see some improvements in terms of capacity and frequency. So really appreciate the update on that program. Can I get a motion to receive this report? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And the final item on our agenda is an update on the Cure Congestion Campaign, and I'm going to have our Executive Director, Mike Buda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is a report on page 23 of your agenda package. I've also got two slides that aren't in your agenda package that helps describe some of what's in there is actually flagged in there that these materials not really ready themselves yesterday actually, so they're fresh off the evidence. So just as background, as a reminder, at the December. Okay. Oh, that sounds better. At the December meeting, the Mayor's Council agreed to pursue a public outreach campaign during the in advance of the federal election to attempt to secure commitments from major parties for additional federal funding for transportation. So you provided that direction back in December. We spent most of the winter preparing this campaign. As you probably recall, in April, beginning of April 9th, we actually launched what we now call the Cure Congestion campaign. We released a platform at that time, and hopefully, as you recall, again, that platform and that position that we're calling on all parties to support really is joining other municipalities from across the country through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, specifically to ask all federal parties to commit to creating a permanent, predictable, long-term federal direct transit funding mechanism. We're calling it a congestion relief fund. FCM actually hasn't launched their own election platform yet. We'll see what kind of language they use, but the notion is the same, to take a model similar to the federal gas tax fund, which every year delivers about $2 billion nationwide using a formula, in that case based on population. We're saying, look, base a permanent direct transit funding mechanism, a congestion relief fund, based on similar principles. Every year we would know exactly how much we were going to get in the long term. That allows us to align federal funding with the kind of planning that we do at this table every month, where we're in fact are making decisions around transit investments in the near term, in the next few months, that may not actually require funding for 5 or even 10 years. If we don't know if that funding is coming, that uncertainty actually impairs your ability to make good planning decisions. So that's what our Cure Congestion campaign is asking for. It would actually deliver that kind of national program that FCM is proposing, a congestion relief fund, which would deliver approximately $375 million a year here in Metro Vancouver, starting in 2028. That's the other aspect I think I'd want to emphasize. We're not asking for new money over and above what's already been committed through the existing transit funding programs that we're using to fund the Phase 1 and 2 plans. We're saying that once those programs expire in 2027, that the historical trend for federal investments in transit simply be continued starting in 2028. That historical trend in this region is about $375 million a year. Starting in 2028, that would give us the certainty we need to deliver the remaining projects in the 10-year vision, as well as to start funding the projects that we'll be identifying through the Transport 2050 plan that we're working on right now. So we launched the campaign on April 9th. On April 7th, a delegation, six of you went to Ottawa. We met with 26 MPs from all parties, from BC and across the country, to raise awareness of our campaign, to draw attention to the critical role that the next federal government's going to have in allowing us to continue expanding our system to keep up with the ridership that Sarah just talked about. It also was specifically designed to ensure that MPs, especially from this region, are aware that this campaign is out there and coming, and the reason it was important to do that is that, and that actually gets to what we're doing here today, up till now, the campaign has really been designed to get our ask out there, our platform out there, to raise general public awareness with media and major parties as to what our platform includes. The next phase, which we're actually launching today at a media conference immediately following this meeting, is launching the public engagement tools that are really part of our campaign, which is going to make it really easy for residents and businesses in this region who believe that and who think that that the 10-year vision and the Transport 2050 plans are important to support, to make it easy for them to communicate directly with candidates from all parties, to MPs and all the parties that are actively involved in the election here, to tell them how important this is and to ask them to support the 10-year vision, the Transport 2050 plan, and the creation of a congestion relief fund. So we'll be launching this campaign today. It's going to include a number of different elements, an ad campaign, which is starting today, which we'll get to in a second, rolling out social media, almost solely based on social media, in fact, all based on social media, includes video, some animated and other graphic ads. We'll be, as much as we can, there's lots and lots of people around the region, including stakeholder organizations, who are really interested in doing similar work. So we're going to be sure to build a resource kit that makes it easy for anyone who wants to speak up for transit during the election to sort of support the work that we're doing, in fact, build on it and continue that work on their own. Our website, which we launched back on April 9th, will include some of these engagement tools to make it easy for people to contact their local MPs and local candidates and their parties based on, these are some screenshots from the ads. This is the tool that's online, so it's really easy for people. If people want to support the campaign, no one has to, but if they do, then it's really easy for them to communicate with parties. Again, with all parties, this isn't a partisan campaign at all. This is trying to reach all candidates from all parties and making sure they understand what's at stake in this election. We've talked about the stakeholder kit. The last thing I wanted to end with is, and this is actually going back to page 24 and 25 of your agenda package. With the launch of this public engagement campaign, it seems timely also to ensure that local governments in the region, to the extent that they're interested in supporting this work, give them a venue, an opportunity to express that support. So in the report that starts on page 23 includes a proposed resolution that if this council were to support it, we would then send it to all 21 local governments plus Tsawwassen First Nation and electoral area A to in turn endorse and then support the campaign that way. So that's my report, Mr. Chair. Happy to answer any questions. Again, there is a recommendation on page 23 to adopt the It's Time to Cure Congestion resolution and send it to local government councils in Metro Vancouver for their consideration in turn.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll open it up to any members around the table that have any comments or questions. I think the decision being put forward is actually taking the support for this out to our local councils there, and then following today's meeting, we're going to be providing some more information about the public engagement campaign and engaging the public in this campaign as well. So I'll open it up if there's anything at this point, but seeing none, there is a recommendation on page 20 of the report. So moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And our next meeting is June 20th, and I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thanks, everyone. What time is...
Can you grab folks as you see them, and I'll get Anna to go too. We should head over there. I think we can start at 12:30, like a little earlier than we said.
Yeah.
But that we can spend 20 minutes just making sure we got time.
Okay.
Evidently, Malcolm's gotten some pressure from somebody crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Malcolm's the one that's been saying, we shouldn't be hearing from public delegates at every meeting. We don't have enough time.
If we wanted to add an hour to our meeting, we could have done that.
Honestly, I think if we want to add delegates to every meeting, we should extend the meeting to 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Because, this is the first time we've ended early since this November.